Before I introduce the panel, and I would like to acknowledge the participation and the presence of the Honorable Deputy Minister for Power, William Aidu, who will be giving some remarks. Before I invite Honorable Minister to join the scene, I would like to provide a gentle reminder of the drink reception, which will take place today at 4:30 at the Agreco tent, which will be the official launch of the Regional Energy Cooperation Summit, taking place from the 26th to the 28th of September in Ghana at the Kempinski Hotel. We have the endorsement of the Honorable Agile Commissioner for Power. We are honored and delighted to have the opportunity to work with you, with the Ghana stakeholders. So please do join us. The Ghana delegation will be there. So having said that, I would like to invite the Honorable Minister Aidu to join us.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Valeria. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Excellencies and colleague ministers, distinguished guests, I'm delighted for the opportunity given me by the organizers to open today's Country Focus on Ghana. This occasion is the 20th anniversary of the Africa Energy Forum, and therefore I would like to focus my presentation on the transformation that has taken place in the past 20 years and our expectation for the next 20 years in Ghana. About 20 years ago, Ghana welcomed its first IPP as part of private sector participation under the power sector reforms to complement a predominantly hydro system. The reforms have contributed to the tremendous improvements in the sector, including one, the unbundling of a formerly integrated power system, allowing for private participation and growth in the sector. Two, the establishment of commercial and technical regulatory agencies leading to the development of commendable electricity standards. Three, increased access to electricity from about 20% in 1995 to the current rate of 85%. And fourth, promotion of private sector participation in electricity distribution through the Millennium Challenge Corporation. Following the reforms, a number of independent power producers successfully negotiated agreements and operated in the generation sector. By the end of 2018, it is expected that 8 IPPs with an installed capacity of about 2,000 megawatts, representing about 45% of the total installed capacity, will be operating in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, the government of Ghana intends to maintain the policy of healthy competition among power producers and distributors to ensure a transparent, fair, and effective regulatory regime for the subsector. With the support of USAID, we have almost completed an integrated resource and resilient master plan, which will guide additions to our generation capacity during the next 10 years. Key issues addressed in the master plan include diversification in the generation mix, ample generation capacity, and commensurate reserve margins at all times. We are also pursuing a transformational agenda to ensure: 1, adequate, reliable, and sustainable gas supply for power generation. 2, improve transmission infrastructure and operations to accommodate increased power generation. And 3, the enhancement of liquidity along the power supply chain. Additionally, we are addressing issues in our distribution infrastructure and operations. The distribution companies have been plagued with high technical and commercial losses, low rates of revenue collection, overloaded networks, and challenges with customer service. The main DISCO, which is the Electricity Company of Ghana, is undergoing some restructuring under a private sector participation initiative with the support from the MCC. This is to improve the performance of ECG and introduce further efficiency gain into the sector. To restore the financial health of the players in the sector, the government of Ghana took a bold initiative in 2017 to issue energy bonds to defray debts that had accrued in the sector over the years. The government has also instituted the cash waterfall mechanism to guarantee payments to generation companies and other players involved in the electricity supply chain. The waterfall mechanism will pool all electricity market revenues to a central point and allocate funds to the respective entities via an agreed distribution formula. This is expected to be rolled out later this year. We intend to achieve our target of universal access to electricity by 2020. To this end, the government of Ghana will intensify rural electrification through grid extensions and off-grid renewable energy solutions for island communities and areas that are difficult to reach. We will take advantage of our abundant resources to increase the contribution of renewables in the energy mix, support climate change mitigation activities, and provide clean energy to all. Ladies and gentlemen, Ghana has since 1962 contemplated the establishment of an integrated aluminum industry using locally mined bauxite, hydropower resources, and the existing aluminum smelter company, that is VALCO. The aluminum value chain presents us with a unique opportunity to transform the economic fortunes of the country. As such, we intend to provide competitively priced power in the context of smelters for VALCO's operations to serve as the pivot for the establishment of an integrated aluminum industry. Distinguished guests, the main policy goal of Ghana power sector is to provide reliable and affordable power for domestic, commercial, and industrial use, and to become a net exporter of power in the sub-region. To this end, the government of Ghana shall provide the enabling environment and opportunities for increased participation in the ownership and management of state-owned utilities, and in the manufacturing and provision of services in the sector, whilst leveraging local technical expertise via the recently passed Local Content Act. We encourage investment in the training and research institutions to deepen skill development and ensure access to highly qualified labor in the operation and management of the energy resources. Sound and sustainable environmental practices in the energy sector, environmental health, safety regulations, and standards remain a priority, and so we encourage partnerships in energy conservation and efficiency. Ladies and gentlemen, before I take my seat and allow the panel to contribute to the discussion, let me state that we seek to promote the employment of women in the subsector and their participation in the formulation and implementation of energy policies. Accordingly, investment to increase access and promotion of the use of modern and sustainable forms of energy in households and women-led businesses are very welcomed. Thank you very much, and we await your visit to Ghana. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ministers, for such a great overview. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rochelle Moore. I head the infrastructure finance platform for RAN Merchant Bank, and I'm based in Lagos, Nigeria. For those who don't know, RAN Merchant Bank has a long history of investing in Ghana. We've invested along the value chain in generation. We've invested in transmission and looking forward to investing in distribution and also in gas infrastructure-related business. I'm delighted to be here today with such a distinguished a panel, and I think it's a great opportunity for you all, after having listened to the Honorable Minister, to also hear from the stakeholders, the one that are shaping the sector on a day-to-day, and hopefully you would learn, from them, from what the experience has been so far and what we can expect going forward. So I would let each panelist to introduce themselves before we dive into a discussion as to what can we expect going forward from Ghana in terms of investment in the energy sector.
I thought I was going to be the last. Anyway, my name is William Amuna. I am an advisor to the Minister of Energy in Ghana. In my previous life, I was CEO of a Ghana Great Company. I have worked in the power systems for close to about 33 years. So you can see the gray is constantly coming. All the 12 of the power systems have given me some gray, and I'm very glad to be here. Let me add to my Minister of Energy by inviting you all to Accra. It's such a beautiful city. When you come, you are really going to enjoy it. Don't miss that opportunity, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Samuel Boachiapia. I'm the Managing Director of Electricity Company of Ghana, Limited.
Good afternoon. My name is Nchidakwa. I'm the Chief Executive of the Volta River Authority. We are the largest generating utility in Ghana. We are state-owned. Our footprints are all over the place. We export to neighboring countries, and we are the future of Ghana. Let me put it that way.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jonathan Amwakuba, the CEO of Ghana Grid Company, the transmission utility asset owner in Ghana. I've worked in the electric supply industry for 33 years across the value chain from generation, transmission, and distribution.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Theo Saki. I'm the Chief Executive of SemPower Generation Company Limited. As the Honorable Minister said, 20 years ago, Ghana had its first IPP, but I think it's important to clarify that that was full equity financed. SemPower Generation Company is the first thermal plant project finance IPP in Ghana, and it is it's a pioneering project that started over 15 years ago and has been able to reach financial close and has provided the basis for more investments in the power sector in Ghana. It's funded, led the development by Africa Finance Corporation, which I work for basically, and that's $4 billion. It's a $4 billion development finance institution that is providing infrastructure finance across Africa.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Cüneyt Uygun. I'm the CEO of Aksa Enerji Üretim Anonim Şirketi. It's a company based in Istanbul, Turkey, which is a publicly traded company with an international investor base. We have invested in Ghana as an independent power producer almost 3 years ago with 370 megawatt power plant, which is operational since approximately 2 years. And following that, we have invested in Mali and Madagascar, 40 megawatt and 66 megawatt overall. Currently, we are running 390 megawatt in Africa, and in Turkey, our homeland, we are running approximately 2,300 megawatt installed capacity, and we are the #1 independent power producer, which is quoted in Istanbul Stock Exchange. I will be very happy and glad to share our experience in Ghana, which I believe is a wonderful country in terms of being there and in terms of making an investment.
Good afternoon. I'm David Epazi. I'm the Development Manager for Building Energy, which is a global IPP active in the renewable space. We develop, finance, and got construction and operation.
Okay. So Building Energy is a global IPP active in the renewable energy space. We develop, finance, build and operate power plants across solar, wind, hydro and biomass. We are originally from Italy, where we have office in US, Cape Town, from which we follow South Africa and Middle East, and where we have around 300 megawatt under construction or under operation in South Africa, expanding across Africa over Uganda with a 10 megawatt solar, and in Mali, where we are closing a 30 megawatt solar.
Thank you very much. So I think you would agree with me that we do have a great panel, and it's going to be a fantastic opportunity for me as an investor to dive into some of the issues that we've seen recently and highlight what the opportunities are going forward. I think the Honourable Minister set up the stage by indicating how far Ghana has gone in electrifying the population. And going from 25% to 85% today is certainly commendable. However, if you've been to Accra recently or are looking for investment in Ghana, I'm sure you would have heard about this issue of overcapacity. As an investor, I would love to have the perspective of my panelists, because when I'm struggling to reconcile how with 85%, meaning there's still 15% remaining to be provided access, how can we be talking about overcapacity? Is it the right question to ask, or should we ask what else needs to be done to divert the existing supply where it needs to go? So I would like to introduce the panel. So Engineer William, if you don't mind sort of taking from a policy standpoint.
Okay, thank you very much. You would recall that a few years ago, we were actually shedding load in Ghana. There were instances where we were shedding close to 800 megawatts. Now, it became so frequent that you would have electricity for a day, then you'd have to stay off for another day before you can get electricity again. For those who've heard of the term doomsaw, in Ghana it means on and off. So you are either on for some time, then after a short while you are taken off, and then somebody else would have to enjoy. Now, in our bid to address this situation, we had so many people coming in, and that has resulted in a kind of demand being far, far below the supply that we have. In fact, currently, we can confidently export 800 megawatt to any country around Ghana that needs that amount of power. Now, but with time, we are definitely industrializing. There is a bid by the government to come out with a number of industrial establishments, factories, dams, and then the rest of them. Now, we also, like the minister said, we have bauxite in our country. We have an aluminum smelter. There is a program to come out with an integrated aluminum processing system. And as you all know, that requires a lot of energy. Now, as we speak, we are just about ready to export power to Burkina Faso. I think the commissioning is taking place now. In the next few days, Ghana should be exporting between 50 and 100 megawatt of power to the sub-region. Now, in addition, we are tied to other countries, La Côte d'Ivoire to the west, Togo, Benin to the east. And under the West Africa Power Pool system, we should be able to export power to any part of the sub-region. Now, and you'd also recall that for such projects, when you are coming out with new projects, you just don't think of your country, you don't, especially for the fact that we are operating under WAP, and it is even more expensive to produce power in Mali and then Burkina Faso. It is good that we are able to have enough energy resources to transport to the rest of the sub-region. So yes, for now we have overcapacity, but we still have room because many more industries will be coming, and then we have the export market too that is also present in the sub-region.
Thank you very much. Could I have the perspective from VRA, for example, who I know currently has, industrial customers in Ghana, and as well as customers outside of Ghana in the likes of Burkina Faso and Togo, what your perspective on this point is?
Rachel, I think that's a good point. He's made a point that there's a potential to export. We've been in the export business for a very long time. We started exporting to Togo, Benin in 1972, so that's almost 50 years. It's been a long business. We also started interchanging power with Côte d'Ivoire in 1983, almost 40 years. So we know what it is. But I think that the greatest point about us having that notional overcapacity is that it gives us the opportunity to export into the West African sub-region. Take it for example, the population in the West African sub-region is about close to 300 people. Extent of electrification is about, call it 40%. Let's say it's about 100 million people have access. That gives us a market of 200 million people. Can you imagine? That's a huge opportunity for us. So we may talk about overcapacity today, but really, I take it as a notional thing that we are talking about. It gives us an opportunity to export, and export intensively. We continue to negotiate with our neighbors to increase the power supplies to them. This year, for example, we are tripling our power supply to Togo Benin. We've given them competitive prices. We know there's competition from Nigeria, the big brother. They always compete with us. But we are fairly confident that we'll be able to win the Togo Benin market. We've had it for 50 years. We'll continue to maintain it. We are taking our footprint to Burkina Faso, as my colleague said. The first step is always important. We are starting with 100 megawatts this year. We probably, as the demand grows in Côte d'Ivoire, industrial development takes place there, we'll grow with the market. So that's the export strategy market that we have. And beyond Côte d'Ivoire, under the West African Power Pool, there's a connection to Mali. So it gives us another opportunity to get to Mali. So our sites are beyond Ghana. It's the export market that will create the opportunity. We see West Africa as just one big market. That's how we see it. And that's what the WAP is all about. So we've placed ourselves strategically, and that's what we hope to achieve in the next couple of years when the WAP materializes.
Okay, thank you. And obviously, we can't speak about demand without speaking about cost. Obviously, residential and industrial demand will depend on how much the electricity costs. So we know recently in February there was a drop in tariff, both industrials and residential, in the attempt to revive demand that was perceived as decreasing. I would like the perspective from ECG as to, is there suppressed demand in the way we understand it, and what are we doing today to ensure that the tariffs going forward are going to allow for demand that may not be here today because of a cost perspective to materialize going forward?
Yeah, thank you. Basically, we at the distribution level would want to make sure that energy is available and is accessible and affordable to users. And one of the strategies that the government has adopted is to make it possible for users to, access the energy in a way that they can afford. Yes, this reduction that you talk about happened about 2 months ago. We are still assessing the situation and its impact on, demand. But I can surely say that between March and now, when the announcement was made about the adjustment, which resulted in reduction, demand, our maximum demand has shot up by at least 50 megawatts, which means that consumers are responding to, this policy decision that was made by the government. And it's expected that this will translate into more revenues so that we can meet our revenue requirement to sustain the factor, the sector. I must say that we still have to operate within the parameters that I mentioned, the availability, the accessibility, and affordability. So we are also putting the necessary infrastructure to make sure that energy is delivered, at the right quality and to customers through various investment programs, intensification, extension, rehabilitation, so that whatever is delivered to customers represents actually the quality that is expected of them. So I would say that there has been this policy direction. The indications are pointing to a positive response, and we expect that going forward in the future, the response will be much better.
Okay. So having looked at sort of the master plan, and the Honourable Minister spoke about it earlier, the need to diversify as well the energy mix. So thermal and hydro are currently dominating, maybe going forward, there's been a lot of talk about renewables, and solar in particular, to also try to reduce the levelized cost of tariff over time. So what are the plans, for renewable energy? Is that the next set of investment we can expect to see in Ghana to fulfill demand? Anyone want to take that? It's more of a policy question, but
I don't know that, the policy man.
Well, let me state that there are certain communities in Ghana which are not accessible, island communities, very remote areas where it's really very expensive to extend electricity to. And we are actually constructing mini grids. We have in mind now about 55 communities, and we've only undertaken 4. In fact, there are many more communities than the 55 I'm stating. Apart from that, I think the chief executive of VRE can talk about that, but there is this thing that we call hybridization, where we would want to conserve water in the hydro dams by combining hydro and then solar. But I think I would leave that to the chief executive of VRA, who is here. But Ghana government has also undertaken to put in a number of rooftop solar to certain people, the remote areas, and then the peri-urban areas. I think the number we are talking of now is about 200,000 rooftop solar all over the country. So we have a place for the renewables in Ghana.
Yeah, I must add that in pursuit of the policy to diversify the energy mix, and specifically the introduction of renewables, ECG, as a major off-taker, has signed on some power purchase agreements with investors in the area of wind energy and some solar plants that are planned to come on board very soon. So far, we have in our energy mix 20 megawatts of solar power that is delivered tied to the grid, and additional 20 will be commissioned very soon. There are other renewable projects investment that are coming on board to increase the component of renewables in the energy mix to what the percentage or the proportion that the government has, targeted of, is it 10% of the energy mix by the year 2030?
Let me just make a comment. Renewable energy is nothing new to us. We started as a renewable energy company. We started with Akusumbo, which is 1,000 megawatts of hydro. So we've always been in that space over time. What we are doing as a state utility and as VRA is that we are taking account of what the minister said, the targets, 10% of our generation portfolio as renewables, and we are moving. We want to take about 70% of that for us as a state utility. But we're doing it in a number of ways. As my colleague said, there's a floating solar concept. We are pursuing that. There's land-based solar. Hopefully by next year, we'll have about 50 megawatts of that. There's also the hybrid, which is a combination of, which is not actually floating, land-based, situated close to the water body, but to operate in an optimized manner. We are doing that as well. Then we have another 150 megawatts of wind. So there's a lot that we are doing. There's a lot that can be done. We'll either do it through ourselves or through the joint ventures with private sector. But we can talk about that as we go along.
Perfect. And I just want to touch on the point of getting to 100% electrification rate by 2020, as mentioned by the minister earlier. I'm directing the question to the CEO of Gridco. Is the grid ready? Are you ready? Are you able to transport those electrons where they need to go by 2020?
Rachel, thank you. We are ready from day one. When VRA was set up, we had a transmission department, which evolved to become the Ghana Grid Company. If you look at Ghana, Gridco has footprints all over the country, from Axim to Zwarungu. You know, we have 161 kilovolts network scattered over the country. Currently, we have about 5,100 circuit kilometers of transmission lines all over Ghana, and we are still building. As we speak, we are building a 330 overlay from Abuaze all the way to Bolgatanga to facilitate the export to Burkina Faso, as Emmanuel talked about. We also built from Abuaze to Davie on the border with Togo as part of the WAP project, which he talked about, so that we can export to Togo, Benin. So to tell you the truth, we have been ready since it started. You know, currently as we speak, in the access is about 85%. You made mention of it, and we are trying as much as possible to get to 90% in electricity. What is it called? In the electricity business, you can never get to 100% at any rate, because as you build, people will also be building. So you try to achieve a universal access, which had been set by the industry, which for us we think is about 90-95%. That is what we are trying to do.
Very good. So as everybody is ready on the public side, I would like to go to our private sector side. Do you agree, first of all, that the country is ready for more? And can you please, as you respond, and I would like for you guys to go one after the other, if you can share your experience to date and highlight what has worked well for you and what you would like to see improved on going forward.
Thank you, Rachel. I'll start first, as probably, as I said, the first project finance thermal plant in Ghana, and the one that sort of has done quite a lot in trying to make sure that projects, there's a bankability structure in place. And I will agree with Jonathan, in terms of the readiness. Even though it has been a new concept, trying to get private sector money into providing power in a way that is anchored primarily by the project company, not in the form of corporate finance. I think that the help that we got from Gridco at that time was phenomenal. They totally understood what the country wanted to do. They provided total support in terms of the technical analysis that was required to get us to be interconnected into the system. They did for us almost all the studies, and even as at now, we're working with them hand in hand as we commission the plant to make sure that the evacuation into the power system is one that will not provide any headaches to our lenders and to our investors. It has been a difficult path, not because, let's say, on the technical side, they were not ready, but also because of the financial challenges that the off-taker sort of faced at that time. There's no gainsaying the fact that there are financial challenges, but I think what is most important has been the fact that the utilities have been extremely supportive. And in this case, I'm going from Gridco to ECG, who is our main off-taker. ECG, yes, of course, during the negotiations, it was extremely difficult because we needed to come and meet. But once that decision had been taken, once the power purchase agreement had been signed, they totally understand and they continue to support to do what has to be done to make us bankable. There are many lessons that we learned along the way, and I think I'll let AXA speak because I think AXA sort of came after in another kind of wave of providing additional power. But they helped us set the stage. And whilst the first one was difficult, I think it's part of that process. It's one of the reasons why right now we can say that, as opposed to many countries across the continent, Ghana is one of the few countries that have more supply than demand and is reliably meeting all its electricity needs.
Junaid.
Thank you, Rachel. I believe our experience is quite interesting to share with the audience here, because as my friend Theo said here, they are the #1 IPP with a full project finance project, which I really envy and applause for that. However, whenever we were discussing the entry to the market in Ghana, the first word that I learned in Ghanaian was, as my friend William said, "Dumsor." So instead of "Hi, how are you?" we learned the word "Dumsor" in the country. It was back in 2014-15. So that was that much critical in that area. And the solution from our side was the put very fast track solution so that Ghana and Ghanaian people will be able to join the electricity as soon as possible. And that timing was only 9 months for us. So we've been able to construct a 370 megawatt thermal power plant in only 9 months period. So that was definitely something very important for the country. And after that, now we're talking about whether we have an overcapacity, we have an excess capacity. I believe that as an investor, as a person who saw the word "Dumsor," I believe that talking about excess capacity, overcapacity is definitely meaningless, because as we all know and as we all experience, Ghana is perhaps the biggest country in the West Africa who has the enough potential to be industrialized and who has enough potential to provide their electricity to the neighboring countries. So I would never call this as an excess capacity. I would say as an opportunity for Ghana to divert their capacity to the neighboring countries and therefore help them as well sort out their issues with their own Dumsor. So for me, the most important thing is that Ghana from now on should have a reliable, constant power with the best affordable and sustainable price and cost elements. And this is not going to be only for the people of Ghana. Of course, it has to be reliable and sustainable for the stakeholders like the ECG and other governmental countries, and especially for the IPPs who would like to do long-term business in the country. Our way of doing business, our way of vision for Ghana is to be the long-term investor in the country. That's for sure. So from that perspective, we definitely honor the experience that we have gone through in Ghana, and we are pretty much comfortable and happy to continue our business in a long-term perspective, to be able to be one of the most important IPP in the country. As far as I know, within the Ministry of Energy, there are 4 IPP who has been selected, chosen, or nominated, however you want to call, as the base load operator of the country, and we are proud to be one of that 4 IPPs in the country. So therefore, we will definitely continue to provide necessary power to the grid, and then with the affordable cost function as we can do. That's my thought.
So on the renewable energy space, I think some good progress has been done. In the past, almost 2 gigawatt of license has been issued of several projects across mainly solar. So far, the framework still needs to be tested on the bankability side, especially over the sovereign guarantee and the put call option agreement, which can be put in place as an alternative for the sovereign guarantee. Potentially in Ghana, especially in the north part of Ghana, the potential for solar is quite important. The government is doing a good progress. I think on the investor perspective, it would be really key to have the resource plan and to understand which will be the next step with the potential allocation of megawatt divided by source and with a reasonable timing. I think Ghana, as the panel was saying, is really in a great position in West Africa, and actually would like to have from concept to reality a solar project happening quite soon, notwithstanding the overcapacity that Ghana is facing now.
So what I take from all of this is there are still opportunities in Ghana. There are opportunities not only in thermal, as traditionally we've seen, but also in the renewable space. And the supply that is needed is not just for Ghana. Ghana is trying to position itself as a regional player. So we need to look at it in a broader scope of also having regional integration through WACP and other distribution channels. What I'm curious to understand, because at the end of the day, we as investors, and I'm sure the audience would also like to better understand, tariff has been a major issue, not just in Ghana, everywhere. It needs to be affordable. So how do we balance the additional supply that is needed with affordability? How do we ensure that we keep on incentivizing the private sector to build additional capacity while maintaining affordability? Any takers? Or should I cold call?
I can share our experience as a private sector, but I'll leave the ground to our honorables there. I believe that's a very good and valid question for the time being for what's going on in Ghana, because we're talking about excess capacity, but we're talking about a very big potential of the growth of the country. So therefore, as our honorable minister was saying, 2020, 100%, I would say not even enough. It should be more than 100%, so that you continue your export capacity in the region as well. So from that perspective, I believe as the system goes better and better in terms of all the mechanism, bureaucratic mechanism, payment mechanism, as it improves more and more every day, I believe better private sector players, international and local, will join the system. And more competition will bring better quality and better pricing. So as again, if we can give an example for back in 5 years ago, there was only 1 or 2 players, and therefore the tariffs were definitely higher. Now that we have more than 10 players in the market, so that was the competition who brought the prices a little bit down as well. And it will continue as it is. So therefore, I would definitely encourage all the international and local players to be investing in Ghana for further megawatts, so that we have the reliable and sustainable pricing for both the people of Ghana and for the IPPs as well.
Rachel, if I may, just a quick one on, there are 2 components of the prices. You have your fixed component, that deals with your capacity charges, and then you have your variable component that deals with your energy charges. Mm-hmm. Mostly your energy charges are driven primarily by the cost of the fuel that you're using, and I think on that perspective, probably we would have Amuna or probably Jeff talking about what Ghana is doing in terms of getting more affordable fuel, that's natural gas, that's cheaper in price. But I think on our side as an IPP, and this was just mentioned, the important thing is to make sure you have the most efficient plant online. And I think that's what has to be driven. And that is what you drive when you do a competitive process and you kind of push for that. There's that efficiency in terms of generation and also efficiency in terms of procurement of the capital that is required. And as you well know, as an investor, if we are all going to the market to raise money for a power plant, so long as the country has all the structures in place, they have a bankable PPA system, they have a group of technocrats who can negotiate with you in a transparent manner and who understand what they're doing, that would help drive down the cost of development and help reduce the capital cost, which is the capacity charge component. So once you're able to get those two components driven down, you'd definitely get up some really low cost numbers, and that would help.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ghana used to have a very interesting tariff system where individuals were actually paying lower than industries. Now that is being corrected. The other thing is that, like the ECG MD said, we are expecting volumes. We are expecting many more people to get online, and we think that that is going to make up for some of the costs. Now, but most importantly is the fact that Ghana has gas. We have some gas fields to the west of the country, and the government is considering looking at a reduction in the gas prices to some of the thermal plants, to the Volta River Authority, and then to the other thermal plants. And we think that that is something that can actually compensate for the reduction in tariffs. So I don't think it's too much of a problem.
But then, Rachel, talking about the excess capacity, for me, I think that it will give rise to industrialization. We're talking about the integrated aluminum industry. What happens to the downstream after the smelter, you know? We need people to come and set up industries to use the excess capacity that has been built. So it gives rise to other industries coming up in Ghana, you know. We have started some industrial enclaves for people to set up industries to use the power that is being produced by the generating companies. So Ghana is open to not only electricity production, but also other forms of industries to set up in Ghana.
Yeah, and the most interesting thing is that from December till about April of this year, demand went up about 350 megawatts. That was a very big figure, just for that short period. So that's an indication that, I mean, with the new industries coming, the government is trying to set up certain industries within the country. We even expect a bigger rise in the demand.
Terrific. Okay. And I think I started by saying that as RMB, we are, you know, we have invested in the Ghanaian power sector. And as a vested investor, I'm keen to understand personally better about the liquidity in the sector. And the minister mentioned earlier several several processes that have been put in place by the government to ensure that going forward we would not have liquidity issues, one of them being the energy bond that was issued. And you also mentioned, Minister, the sector cash waterfall. So I'm sure the audience will also be very interested in understanding how do we ensure that we can actually pay and make everybody along the value chain whole as we develop more capacity. I'm looking at you, the CEO of ECG, so I'm hoping for a bit more clarity, and we also know you're going through a concession, process that was also mentioned. So if you can please speak to what to expect going forward as you hold the liquidity of the sector in your hands.
Thank you, Rachel. Basically, power that has been consumed, energy that has been consumed should be paid for and should be collected. So it's a matter of introducing efficiencies into the collection methods, the mode of collection, and making it easy and flexible for consumers to be able to pay for the electricity that they have consumed. Then the revenue that is collected can be shared along the entire value chain in the proportion of everyone's contribution. So what we in UCG are doing is the introduction of, it's already been spoken of here, but the smart prepayment systems to increase collection and at the same time address the issue of losses, both technical and commercial, in a certain way. But as you mentioned, and as the minister also rightly mentioned, the owner of ECG, which is a government, has taken a very bold decision to introduce a private sector participant in ECG's operation to address some of the inefficiencies and the concerns that have been raised by all stakeholders in the distribution sector. And the process has reached an advanced stage. We are just on the verge of signing the transaction, agreements for this private sector participant to come in February 2019. It presents a huge opportunity for investments in the metering, billing, expansion, reinforcement of the network, and generally improvement in customer service delivery. And you would agree with me that all this contribute to the efficiencies that will be required to, improve upon revenue collection, to pay all the players, including investors, like your good self, along the value chain. So, yes, whilst even waiting for the private sector participants, ECG on its own is introducing online payment, systems where customers can sit in the comfort of their homes and top up their prepayment, recharge their prepayment systems, or even pay for the electricity that they have consumed, by way of credit purchases, etc., etc. We are also making our services easily accessible or available to customers by opening up new customer service centers and educating them on the need to pay and intensifying using other legal means to also get recalcitrant customers to pay for the energy that they have consumed. But it is expected that when the private sector participant comes on board, the needed investment that is required to enhance or improve upon these activities will be made. Let me just take advantage of this opportunity to highlight the fact that the Ghana private sector participant into the distribution sector is the model. It's not like others where it's a wholesale or a sale of the ECG assets. There will be the private sector participant who is coming as a concessionaire to manage, operate, and invest in the network for a period of 20 years. ECG will continue to exist and will be a bulk trader of energy. This excess energy capacity that we are talking about, we own most of them because of the power purchase agreement that we have signed. And then we would also be involved in the monitoring the performance of the concessionaire in terms of how best or how good they are using the assets that have been handed over to them. So ECG will continue to exist, and then the concessionaire will perform some commercial and technical aspects of our business. I must also indicate that as a result of this, we are also exploring other business opportunities to, continue with our mandate as a utility company.
Are the legacy debts something of the past? Meaning, have the energy bonds achieved what they were meant to do? And are we now going forward with a clean slate of going forward?
Rachel, let me put it this way. There are two issues. Well, we are still grappling with both issues. There's the issue of liquidity, which is what he was just talking about, dealing with the liquidity. And then there was also the issue of the inter-utility debt, which was a debt that had accumulated over time. So the bonds have been issued to liquidate the debt, to take care of that difficulty. The cash waterfall mechanism, this is what he just described. It's a novel thing. And for us as a state institution, for us as a major player, that is what we should do. Because this issue of liquidity and how the money is distributed along the entire value chain has always been a problem. It's been a problem for more than 20 years now. We used to have what we call the cross debt, where the Ministry of Finance sits in the middle, and then there's a clearing house that allocates the debts among, but it wasn't as transparent as we all would have liked it. This one is a more transparent mechanism. It's been practiced elsewhere. A variation of it is being practiced in La Côte d'Ivoire successfully. So we think that we should support it. I think the IPPs should be happy about it because, unfortunately for my colleague here, it takes away his discretion to decide who to pay and who not to pay, or who to prioritize and who not to prioritize. We always had the short end of the stick under those circumstances. So I think that it should be comforting for all of us, public, private. This is the way to go.
Terrific. Okay, so I'm afraid, unfortunately, that we're running out of time. It's very unfortunate because it's so rare to have all the stakeholders to be providing answers. I'd like to give an opportunity for people to ask questions. Okay, I wasn't sure whether we had time. Do we have any questions in the audience before we conclude? We still have closing remarks that need to happen. So if you're, okay, I see a hand over there towards the end. If you can please introduce yourself and then specify who the question is addressed to.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Sydney, I'm with Standard Bank Ghana. So the current surplus situation in Ghana is being dealt with through exports, from what I understand from the panel. To what extent is pricing impacting on our ability to export? I know we spoke about export, but we seem to be doing it on a limited scale as of now. Ghana has an installed capacity of over 4,500. Peak demand is probably not more than 2.5. There are plants that are coming on stream. We'll probably be sitting over 5,000 by the end of the year. Are we going to be able to export the surplus? If pricing is is having an impact on our ability to export, what are we doing about it? Not to anybody directly. Anybody can answer. Sure.
Valeria, how many questions can we take?
Let's say 3.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Mr. Terje Osmundsen, Empower New Energy. I have a question which relates to, maybe I will challenge a couple of you to respond to this. The one theme that I think we have not covered is actually the surprisingly low renewable share of the power mix of Ghana. I mean, the reality, more or less the elephant in the room is that more than 50% of actual consumption is covered by fossil fuel, whereas the country has huge potential for increased renewables. So my question is, I mean, other than what has been described, one way forward, of course, is to let bulk customers install renewables and then increase the renewable share that way. So my question then is, if this happens, a key issue will then be net metering for bulk customers. Is that something which is now around the corner? So bulk customers who install renewables and periods do not use, will they have access, possibility to inject into the net? Thank you.
Hello, Dermot Toomey, EMP Ghana. We're a wind energy developer based in Accra. I suppose a general question to the panel around the procurement of utility scale renewables in Ghana. Is there policy or is there upcoming strategy to deal with that? And then I suppose specifically to ECG, what or how will the appointment of a new concessionaire impact the procurement of utility scale renewables in the near term?
So should we start? So thank you very much, everyone, for the question. So the first question was around export and how pricing or tariff impact export and what are we doing, about it. I think it was mentioned briefly during the discussion, but if someone wants to expand a bit more, talking about gas and other source of energy to lower the cost and incentivize export.
Rachel, I will attempt to answer the question. I think that when I made the point that we were exporting, and I've been exporting for years, what I really was saying that we know very well the export market. We've been in it for 50 years or so. When we say we are going to increase our exports, it's all trade. It's all driven by prices. We are not exporting just because we have excess capacity. We know the cross-border price. We know how much Cote d'Ivoire sells to Burkina Faso. We know the opportunity cost of power generation in all those countries. We think that we are competitive enough. We are competitive because we've reduced our total cost of generation. Gas has been discovered. We have a blend of hydro and thermal, which makes us more competitive. And as they said, the gas prices were lower just in March. We've passed on that benefit to our export customers. So that is why I made the point that in this year alone, we are tripling our supply to Togo Benin. And that's phenomenal. We would have supplied just 230 gigawatt hours to them. We are going to supply to them close to 1,000 megawatts. In all, let me summarize, in all, we are going to export about 10%, I think, of our annual generation to the export market. We want to grow that market, and we won't grow it, and we are confident we can grow it because we know we are competitive. We've cut down our overhead costs, more efficient, and as I said, because of the diversity of supply, and more importantly, because of the security of supply that we provide, it's good for our export customers to enjoy that benefit, and that is why we have that market. So pricing is an issue for us, but we've gone under the radar as far as pricing is concerned. We are offering a service that comes to our neighboring countries much cheaper than they can deliver themselves.
Thank you. You want to add something?
No, the utility scale.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, yes, utility scale renewable is part of government policy. We are expecting a company, by next year they should be coming in with some level of wind. I think initially they will be coming with about
50 megawatts.
50 megawatts, and then that would go up to about 125, 150 megawatts very soon. Now, earlier on, the ECG MD also indicated that they had 20 megawatt solar, and they were adding yet another 20 megawatt. I know VRA also has some plans to come in. Now, what I noticed when I was CEO was the fact that so many people came in with loads and loads and loads of solar, some of them 400 megawatts, but in the end, with all the encouragement we gave them, they just couldn't get to a financial close. For some reasons I don't understand. But on the part of government, we are sponsoring that. We are actually encouraging people to come in because the policy is to have minimum 10% of our generation to be from renewables outside hydro. For now, if we add hydro, we have about 41% renewables. And for many countries, especially in Europe, they consider hydro, large-scale hydro, to be part of their renewable mix. In Ghana, we are taking the 10% outside hydro. So let me call them the renewables renewable instead of the major hydro projects. Yep.
Yeah. Net metering. Yes, net metering is a policy that has been adopted by the government and will be implemented very soon. All the discussions around it have been concluded. It's some numbers that we are yet to agree on. And I believe sincerely that the discussions and the conversations will be concluded very soon for us to formally announce it so that those who would want to embark on such a venture can comfortably have the confidence that they will be compensated for, delivering energy into the grid. Now, on the question of the concessionaire, is it participating in utility scale renewables? I would say the transaction structure now does not permit that. The transaction structure is said that ECG will continue to own all the energy or the kilowatt hours because we have signed onto all the PPAs as a major off-taker in the past. And not until we have exhausted the capacity that we have to the concessionaire, they cannot go out to contract any additional energy. So this is the policy that is guiding the transaction for now.
So I think this concludes our session. Thank you very much. I hope you found the session informative, and I do hope that you have better clarity for those willing and ready to invest in Ghana as to what to expect. The Honorable Minister concluded his opening remark with a perspective for the next 5, 10, 20 years. And I think one thing we can say as RMB is that we have seen the implementation of the plan and the persistence in making sure that what is being thought through is actually being put in place. And we hope to see, and when we talk next time and reflect about what has happened, that we can have a positive conclusion as the one we have today, having achieved 85% electrification rate over the past 20 years. So thank you very much. We're going to have closing remarks from, and apologies if I'm mispronouncing the name, from Honorable Daniel Asukwo, the Chairman, Committee on Power, National Assembly of Nigeria. So welcome, sir. I will give you the stand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister and panelists and invited guests. Actually, I was supposed to give the opening remarks in the Nigerian session, but came in a little bit late due to international connections and all that. I want to appreciate the session I just listened to. I believe that West Africa were making progress. I met with the minister in Washington, and it was a very interesting session as such. And today I'm also seeing that there's much more progress being made with our sister country, Ghana. Nigeria is making progress, and I guess Ghana is learning from the mistakes that Nigeria has made. I know Ghana has unbundled, but it's taking its time to go to the public market or to, completely privatize like we did in Nigeria. And I'm sure that Nigeria being the power nation by population, having the markets and all that, we should have the problems we have, but government is making all this progress. So I want to encourage the regional conference. I'm sure that there's a lot we can partner together in the next conference, which of course is going to be held in Ghana. I've been to Ghana a couple of times, and I like the way my brothers are conducting themselves. But the problems of a small country and a big country, of course, is different. But I'm sure together we can work and make our regional country a better place. And with the different projects that we're trying to do around the region, with the gas project and all that, the Trans-African Highway and all that we're trying to do, I'm sure that we can do something better. So I want to thank the organizers and wish all of us a better deliberation in our next meeting. Thank you.
Alrighty. Thank you very much. This concludes the session.